Hello everyone and welcome. Today we're talking about OSHA Process Safety Management Element 6. It's contractors. Contractor safety is not just a rule to follow. It's where regulation, real operational risk and safety culture come together. OSHA explained this clearly in 29 CFR 1910.119H, and it tells us how the host company must manage and work with contractors in high hazard facilities like refineries. If we look at past major accidents, one lesson is very clear. Many incidents didn't happen because people were careless. They happened because contractors didn't fully understand the site hazards, or because communication between the refinery and the contractors was weak. Contractors often work on critical equipment, especially during shutdowns, maintenance, or construction. They may be very skilled at their job, but without proper site orientation, clear procedures, and strong coordination with operations, the risk can increase very fast. In this session, we will explain the OSHA PSM contractor elements in a simple and practical way. We will cover what OSHA requires, what those requirements mean in real operation, and how safety specialists can apply them effectively in the field. By the end of this video, you will understand one key point. Contractor safety is not paperwork. It's a critical safety barrier that helps prevent major accidents.
OSHA included the contractor element in the Process Safety Management standard for a very clear reason. Many major industrial accidents have occurred during maintenance, shutdowns, or renovation activities, exactly when contractors are working inside high-risk process areas. In many of these events, contractors were either exposed to catastrophic releases or unintentionally contributed to them. The common causes were familiar. Contractors did not fully understand the process hazards, or coordination and communication between the site and the contractor were weak. To address these failures, OSHA introduced 29 CFR 1910.119H. This section is built on a shared responsibility model. Under this model, the host employer, meaning the facility owner, has clear and specific responsibilities, and the contract employer also has clear and specific responsibilities. These duties cannot be transferred, ignored, or assumed to belong to the other party. The goal is simple and very direct. Work performed by contractors must never reduce process safety or equipment integrity. It is also important to understand when Element 6 actually applies. OSHA PSM does not apply to every contractor on site. It applies based on the type of work being performed, not the job title or company name. Paragraph H applies to contractors who perform work that can affect process safety, such as maintenance or repair activities, turnarounds and shutdowns, major renovations, and specialized technical work. These activities are usually performed on or near a covered process. OSHA clearly separates this type of work from incidental services that do not impact process safety. For example, work such as pipe fitting on process lines, heat exchanger repair, unit turnarounds, or reactor and vessel cleaning is covered under PSM. On the other hand, services like catering, janitorial work, groundskeeping, laundry services, or office equipment repair are considered incidental and are not covered by Paragraph H. For safety specialists, this distinction is critical. Not every contractor needs full PSM controls, but any contractor who can affect the process does. To apply the contractor requirements correctly, we must clearly understand what OSHA means by a process. Under OSHA PSM, a process includes any activity involving a highly hazardous chemical. This includes the use, storage, manufacturing, handling, or on-site movement of that chemical. If a facility has a chemical at or above the threshold quantity listed in OSHA Appendix A, then the process is covered, and the contractor requirements fully apply. These threshold quantities, often called TQs, define when a contractor is entering a PSM-covered environment. The hazards involved may be toxic, flammable, reactive, or explosive, and these hazards determine how much training, hazard communication, and supervision contractors must receive. For example, anhydrous ammonia has a threshold quantity of 10,000 pounds, chlorine has a threshold of 1,500 pounds, ethylene oxide 5,000 pounds, anhydrous hydrogen fluoride 1,000 pounds, methyl isocyanate 250 pounds, and phosgene only 100 pounds. There is an important lesson in these numbers. Some chemicals have very low threshold quantities, but extremely high consequences. This means that even small amounts of highly toxic chemicals trigger full OSHA PSM compliance. In these environments, contractor management becomes a critical safety barrier, not an administrative task. Without proper controls, a contractor can unknowingly compromise containment, and the result can be catastrophic. Under OSHA Process Safety Management, the host employer, meaning the facility owner, carries the ultimate responsibility for site safety and process integrity. This responsibility does not transfer when work is assigned to contractors. OSHA is very clear about this in 29 CFR 1910-1119H. The host employer must actively manage contractor safety, not simply approve documents or rely on contract language. To meet this requirement, OSHA defines several core responsibilities that every host employer must fulfill. The first responsibility begins before the contractor ever enters the site. Contractor selection is the first and one of the most important safety barriers. The host employer must evaluate the contractor's safety performance and safety programs in a meaningful way. Many organizations focus only on lagging indicators such as total recordable incident rate or experience modification rate. While these numbers have value, they are not enough in high-hazard environments. Safety specialists must also look at leading indicators that reflect real safety culture. This includes the quality of written safety programs, training and competency records, toolbox talks, near-miss reporting practices, and the contractor's history of OSHA violations. One important red flag is a contractor with a very low injury rate, but no reported near misses. In high-hazard facilities, underreporting is dangerous. Strong contractor selection focuses on safety culture and process safety capability, not statistics alone. Once a contractor is selected, the host employer has a duty to fully disclose site-specific hazards. This includes fire hazards, explosion hazards, toxic release hazards, and any process conditions related to the specific job being performed. This is not a generic HSE induction. The information must be technically specific to the chemicals involved, the operating pressures, and the operating temperatures. For example, if a contractor is working in a hydrogen fluoride unit, they must clearly understand the extreme corrosiveness of HF, its toxic vapor behavior, and the potential for rapid vapor cloud formation. Without this level of technical understanding, even experienced and skilled workers can make fatal mistakes. Another critical responsibility of the host employer is ensuring contractor awareness of the emergency action plan. Contractors must be informed about alarm signals, evacuation routes, muster points, and emergency communication expectations. Many major accidents have shown the same failure. Contractors did not know what the alarm meant, where to go, or who was in charge during an emergency. In these situations, seconds matter. Every person on site, whether employee or contractor, must be able to react correctly and immediately, without confusion or delay. The host employer must also establish and enforce safe work practices to control how contractors enter process areas, perform work, and exit the site. This control is usually implemented through a permit-to-work system. Permits are used to manage high-risk activities such as lockout and tagout, confined space entry, hot work, and line breaking. These permits are not paperwork exercises. They are active safety controls that allow safety specialists to identify hazards, verify isolations, confirm gas testing, and monitor compliance directly in the field. Finally, the host employer must continuously monitor contractor performance. Contractor safety management does not end after induction or orientation. It requires regular field observations, audits, behavioral checks, and ongoing verification that contractors are following site safety rules. Oversight must be visible, consistent, and enforced. When contractor safety is treated as a continuous process rather than a one-time requirement, the risk of serious incidents is significantly reduced. This is the true intent of OSHA PSM Element 6. Active host-employer involvement, clear expectations, and constant verification that contractor work does not compromise process safety or put lives at risk. In OSHA Process Safety Management, safety is a shared responsibility. The host employer sets the site rules, provides process information, and explains the hazards of the facility. But the contract employer is responsible for the behavior, competence, and performance of their own workers. This shared responsibility creates a system of checks and balances. Each party has a clear role, and neither side can ignore its duties. One of the most important responsibilities of the contract employer is training and competency verification. The contract employer must ensure that every contract employee is properly trained to perform their job safely. This training must cover the correct work practices, the specific process hazards of the unit where the work is being done, and the emergency response procedures explained by the host employer. OSHA is very clear on one critical point here. Even if the host employer delivers the training or provides classroom instruction, the legal responsibility remains with the contract employer to ensure that their workers actually understood the training. Simply attending a class or signing a training sheet is not enough. Because of this, the contract employer must keep proper training records. These records must clearly show the name of the contract employee, the date of the training, and, most importantly, how understanding was verified. This verification of understanding is a key OSHA expectation. Acceptable methods include written tests, hands-on practical demonstrations, or structured questions asked directly by a supervisor. OSHA does not accept assumptions. Understanding must be demonstrated and proven, not assumed based on attendance alone. In addition to training, contract employees are required to follow all site safety rules. This includes permit-to-work systems, lockout and tagout procedures, confined space entry rules, and personal protective equipment requirements. This is not optional. It is a direct OSHA requirement under 1910-119H. If a contractor bypasses a safety interlock, ignores a permit condition, or fails to wear required PPE, the responsibility does not stop with the individual worker. In that situation, the contract employer is in violation because supervision and enforcement are part of their duty. The contract employer also has a proactive responsibility when it comes to hazards. They must inform the host employer about any unique hazards created by their work, as well as any new hazards discovered during the job. For example, if a contractor plans to use a special chemical to clean a heat exchanger, and that chemical could react with process fluids, this risk must be reported and reviewed before work begins. In process safety, surprises are dangerous. Hazards must be shared early, not discovered during an incident. The key message for safety specialists is simple. Contractor safety is not controlled by one side alone. The system works only when the host employer sets clear and realistic rules, the contract employer ensures real worker competency, and both sides communicate openly and continuously. This shared responsibility is the true intent of OSHA PSM Element 6, Contractors. To truly understand why contractor management matters, we must look at real accidents, not just regulations. The U.S. Chemical Safety Board, or CSB, has investigated many major disasters where poor contractor management was either the main cause or a critical contributing factor. These cases are not history lessons. They are warnings for safety specialists, showing us exactly where systems fail when contractor safety is not taken seriously. Let's start with the BP Texas City refinery explosion in 2005. In this incident, a massive explosion killed 15 workers and injured more than 180. During a unit startup, a distillation tower overfilled and flammable hydrocarbons were released violently, forming a large vapor cloud that ignited. The most important contractor lesson from this disaster is simple and shocking. Every person who died was a contractor. They were working in temporary trailers placed extremely close to the ISOM unit, some as near as 121 feet. These trailers were positioned for convenience, not for safety. BP failed to evaluate what would happen if a major release occurred and how an explosion would affect occupied contractor buildings. This case teaches us a critical lesson. Contractor safety is not only about what contractors do, but also about where the host employer places them on the site. At Texas City, the failure was not a single mistake. Contractor trailers were located too close to a high-hazard unit. Contractors were not properly informed about startup risks, the number of trainers and supervisors had been drastically reduced, and operators were working extreme overtime during startup. Multiple weaknesses lined up at the same time, with catastrophic results. Now let's look at the Motiva, Delaware City refinery accident in 2001. In this case, a contractor was killed, and 8 others were injured when a spark from hot work ignited flammable vapors inside a sulfuric acid storage tank. The investigation revealed that the tank was severely corroded, with holes in the roof and shell that allowed flammable vapors to escape into the surrounding area. However, Motiva did not consider the tank farm to be covered under PSM. Because of this, mechanical integrity controls were weak, hot work oversight was insufficient, and atmospheric monitoring was not adequate. Most importantly, the contractor was never informed about the real condition of the tank. This case clearly shows why the host employer has a duty to disclose known fire, explosion, and toxic hazards. When the host knows a hazard and does not communicate it, the risk is transferred directly to the contractor's life. The third example comes from Wacker Polysilicon in 2020, and it highlights a different type of contractor failure: technical misunderstanding. In this incident, a contractor pipefitter over-tightened flange bolts on a heat exchanger. As a result, a graphite nozzle cracked and gaseous hydrochloric acid was released. The key issue was the presence of mixed materials. The graphite equipment required only 15 foot-pounds of torque, while nearby carbon steel piping required between 40 and 67 foot-pounds. The contractor did not realize they were working with materials that had very different mechanical limits. This incident teaches an important lesson for safety specialists. Contractors performing precision maintenance need specialized training and close technical oversight. Experience alone is not enough when equipment materials are unusual or sensitive. The key takeaway from CSB investigations is clear. Contractor accidents are rarely caused by one simple error. They happen when gaps in training, communication, oversight, and facility siting come together at the same time. OSHA PSM Element 6 exists to stop these gaps before they align. Contractor safety is not paperwork. It is a life-saving barrier. To truly protect people, compliance on paper is not enough. Safety specialists must move from passive compliance to active verification. When it comes to contractor safety, this means having a strong auditing program that checks what is actually happening in the field, not just what is written in files. A practical and effective contractor audit looks at safety from 3 angles at the same time: document review, field observation, and direct conversation with workers. Together, these 3 steps give a complete and realistic picture of contractor safety performance. The first step in this process is records review. This includes checking contractor pre-qualification documents, training and orientation records, and competency logs. However, the focus should never be on signatures alone. The most important question a safety specialist must ask is, how was understanding verified? During records review, it is essential to confirm that training is current, especially for PSM-related work, where training is typically expected within the last 3 years. The training must also be site-specific, and the records should clearly show evidence of tests, practical demonstrations, or supervisor evaluations. If a record only shows a name and a signature, that is a weak control and a warning sign. The second level of auditing is field verification. This is where safety specialists observe how work is actually being performed. Are permits being followed exactly as written? Are isolations and gas testing respected? Are contractors wearing the required PPE and working within the approved scope? A signed permit does not mean the job is being done safely. A permit that looks good on paper but is ignored in the field creates a false sense of safety. The third and most powerful step is talking directly to the workers. This is where auditors get closest to the real risk. Simple questions can quickly reveal whether training has truly been effective. Asking a worker what chemical is inside a pipe, what the main hazards of the unit are, what they would do if the site-wide alarm sounded, or where their nearest exit or muster point is, can immediately show the level of understanding. If a worker cannot answer these basic questions, then training may have been delivered and paperwork may be complete, but understanding has failed in practice. In that case, the means to verify understanding was not effective. The key message for safety specialists is this: good contractor audits are not about catching people doing something wrong. They are about confirming real understanding. When training records, field behavior, and worker knowledge all align, OSHA PSM Element 6 is working as intended. When they don't, the system is giving you an early warning before an incident happens. OSHA process. Safety management elements do not work in isolation. Element 6, which focuses on contractors, is deeply connected to every other PSM element. Experience shows that when one part of the PSM system becomes weak, contractor safety is often the first area to fail. That is why safety specialists must stop viewing contractors as an external group and start treating them as an integral part of the PSM ecosystem. One of the strongest connections is with mechanical integrity. Many critical mechanical integrity activities are performed by contractors, including non-destructive testing, pressure relief valve inspection and testing, and highly specialized inspections and repairs. The host employer must ensure that contractors follow recognized and generally accepted good engineering practices, or RAGAJP. The risk here is often hidden. If a contractor uses the wrong material of construction, the problem may not appear immediately. Installing carbon steel where a special alloy is required, or using the wrong gasket or bolts, may allow the equipment to operate for months or even years before failing. When that failure happens, the root cause often traces back to contractor work. This is why contractor quality is process safety, not just maintenance quality. Contractors also play a major role in process hazard analysis, especially when human factors are considered. OSHA requires PHAs to address human factors, and contractors represent a significant risk in this area. They may be unfamiliar with the unit's history, unaware of previous incidents or known weak points, and often work under tight schedules and time pressure. During PHAs, teams must specifically evaluate contractor involvement, particularly during contractor-intensive periods such as turnarounds and shutdowns. These periods involve many contractors, many permits, and many simultaneous activities, creating the highest potential for human error. Another critical link is with management of change. Changes in how a facility uses contractors can themselves be process safety changes. Outsourcing maintenance that was previously done in-house, or reducing experienced staff and increasing reliance on contractors are organizational changes that should trigger an MOC review. Without MOC, institutional knowledge can be lost, oversight capability can weaken, and contractor supervision can decline. When these changes go unmanaged, contractor safety programs slowly degrade, often without anyone noticing until an incident occurs. Auditing is the next essential connection. To verify that the contractor program is working, safety specialists must use structured audits aligned with OSHA requirements. Effective audits ask meaningful questions. Were contractors evaluated before selection? Were site-specific fire and toxic hazards explained? Is there real proof that training understanding was verified? Do contractors report hazards introduced by their work? Are they included in emergency response briefings? These questions measure the strength of the system, not the completeness of paperwork. True verification happens in the field. Real auditing means going to the job site and touching the permit. A safety specialist should physically check the permit and compare its conditions with what is actually happening. If a hot work permit requires a fire watch, but the fire watch is helping with welding instead of watching for sparks, then the permit system has failed, no matter how perfect the paperwork looks. This is why effective safety professionals always get close to the source. Contractor management becomes even more challenging when subcontractors are involved. Many primary contractors hire subcontractors for specialized tasks. OSHA is clear that PSM requirements must flow down through every level of the workforce. If a subcontractor is on site without proper briefing, verified training, or permit awareness, the host employer remains responsible. There is no safety shortcut through subcontracting. Another challenge appears at remote and normally unoccupied facilities. In oil, gas, and chemical operations, contractors often work at isolated sites. Even if some PSM elements are partially exempt, the hazards still exist. Contractors still need process safety information, and emergency response plans must still apply. Distance does not reduce risk. In many cases, it increases it. The final message for safety specialists is clear. Contractor safety succeeds only when it is fully integrated into mechanical integrity, considered during process hazard analysis, managed through management of change, verified through audits, and controlled in the field. Element 6 is not a standalone rule. It is a connecting thread across the entire PSM system.
Managing contractors under OSHA PSM Elements is not a static task, and it's not a checklist exercise. It is a living process that requires a strong technical understanding, clear administrative control, and constant presence in the field. CSP investigations and OSHA enforcement history show the same pattern again and again. Contractor failure often occur at communication boundaries between companies, between supervisor, and between paperwork and real work. That is exactly why Element 6 is one of the most frequently cited elements in OSHA PSM. To achieve real excellence in contractor safety, safety specialists must move toward a safety partnership model. Contractors should not be treated as outsiders. They should be treated as professional partners in managing process risk. This partnership starts with how contractors are selected. Contractor selection must go beyond a simple injury statistic like TRIR. What really matters is experience with high hazard processes, the ability to perform complex mechanical integrity, and the strength of the contractor's internal system for verifying worker competency. Low injury numbers means very little if process knowledge is weak. This partnership also depends on real site-specific hazard information. Generic safety information are not enough for PSM-covered processes. Contractors must clearly understand the specific chemicals involved, the limit and sensitivities of equipment, and what can go wrong and how fast the situation can escalate. Process safety requires technical clarity and not general warning. Another critical pillar is verification of understanding. The most important requirement in contractor training is the means to verify understanding. Attendance sheets don't prove readiness. Effective contractor programs use testing, practical demonstration, and direct questioning in the field. If understanding is not verified, then training has failed, no matter how complete or impressive the documentation may look. Oversight must also be visible and continuous. Contractor safety only works when safety specialists are active in the field. This means regular field audit, talking directly to workers, checking permit at the job site, and verifying that rules are followed under real working conditions. Safety programs don't succeed in failure. They succeed where the work is happening. Contractors often work on the most dangerous part of our facility, especially during startups, shutdowns, and maintenance activities. When we treat contractors as true partners in process safety, we protect every person on site. We strengthen the entire PSM system, and we prevent the catastrophic releases that OSHA PSM was designed to stop. So here is the call to action. As a safety specialist, ask yourself today, do my contractors really understand my process hazards? Can I prove their competency in the field and not just on paper? And when was the last time I personally checked a contractor permit at the job site? If this content was useful, share it with your team, discuss it during your next toolbox talk, and commit to making one real improvement to your contractor management program this week. Because contractor safety is not about compliance, it's about process safety leadership. Stay safe and see you in the next episode.